Hello, I'm Krista McAllister, and welcome to Cerius Leadership. Whether you are growing your business, growing your career, or possibly both, thank you for listening. I'm joined today by Robert Rose, seasoned marketing strategist, really trusted advisor to global brand leaders. With a career spanning tech, media, and beyond, Robert, you've been helping brands craft and share their stories with impact for decades. I've been looking forward to our discussion today because marketing and specifically content marketing is one of
Mm.
my favorite topics. So thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm absolutely honored to be here. Yeah, and talk about the fun stuff for sure.
That to me, it's the fun stuff. So,
Yeah.
not that all areas of business aren't fun to each individual, but really that marketing and the content, hence content creation, one of my favorite things. But I think you're going to help me go a little bit beyond it and dissect it a little because I don't think I've had a marketing discussion this past year that didn't involve the topic of content marketing. So
Right?
let's start there. What is it? Are there different types of it? And maybe some of what's driving it to be the topic of conversations.
Yeah, I mean it is driving a lot of the topic of conversation these days. And in many ways, one of the things that I wrote, I don't know if it was a humble brag or not, sort of in my last book was in so many ways, what we thought would happen was that content marketing it would become just part of overall marketing. But in a weird way, it's sort of the reverse. Marketing has become what content marketing always promised to be, which was really the creation of valuable content aside from our product or our brand or our service or whatever it is we put into the marketplace. Content that is just valuable in its own right, whether it's entertaining, engaging, educational, whatever it happens to be with the distinct purpose of changing a behavior of an audience that we want to reach. And that's at its simplest core what it is, but it's really sort of the idea of how do we create valuable experiences, content-driven experiences for various constituencies, whether that be customers, whether it be partners, whether it be employees, whether it be all kinds of different audiences in order to drive a business goal, right? And so it is really brands as media operations, and that's really is as simple as that.
I love that you said you took all the stakeholders into account because we're starting to
Yeah,
see market come full circle and bleed into all areas of the organization to where some HR organizations are even having their own marketing communications expert for the employer branding. Our business might be just about the customer, but our marketing has multiple stakeholders. There could be a board, there could be an investment group, and it's needing to take all those into account.
that's right. That's right. Because they all serve a different business function, right? Whether it's employer branding, like you're saying, and storytelling to make our organization seem like a great place to want to work for, or a place that we want to continue to work for, and whether that's focusing on our purpose or whatever it is from a brand perspective. But then to your point, there are also analysts, right? If we're a B2B
Mhm.
organization and we're looking to get traction with the analyst community, or we're trying to get traction with influencers or other creators who are going to go out and evangelize our particular approach to solving a customer's problem. And then, of course, there's the classic like customers, right? Customers that we are trying to ultimately turn into loyal, fanatical, evangelical customers that, that stick with us.
And you mentioned using that content to change behavior. That's a pretty
Right.
powerful statement.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's marketing writ large, right? Is the idea of what we're really trying to do, and I always fall back on my Philip Kotler. And I'm a marketing geek student by nature, and Philip Kotler, who defined general marketing as create, communicate, and deliver value to a target at a profit, right? So it builds in the efficiency and it builds in the idea of creating value with that customer or whoever the target audience is, but it really is ultimately about getting them to believe something differently than they believed before, changing their actionable behavior to do something that we want them to do. That's the heart of what we're trying to do in marketing is get you to do something that I want you to do, which is ultimately changing a behavior. And hopefully, hopefully it's, if
Meaning
we have
customer.
integrity, it's a good behavior, right? It's a positive thing.
Use for good, not for evil.
That's right.
And you mentioned that, when you look at, let's say, prior to 5, maybe even 10 years ago, we thought, well, content is part of a marketing strategy.
Right.
And did I hear you correctly say, no, now marketing is trying to figure out how do we become part of the content strategy? It's
And
the inverse of that.
yeah, increasingly, well, that's what I'm finding, right? It used to be, when we started doing this, as a, content marketing is as old as time, right? I mean, going back to the Michelin guide, that was, where Michelin tires decided to create a travel guide, to, encourage people to drive more,
Mhm.
thus put more wear on their tires, thus turning into a Michelin starred restaurant, right? That's the classic. To everything in between, to airline magazines, to soap operas. There are so many different examples throughout history of what content marketing was as kind of a side project of marketing, right? It became, and even in 2010, 2011, when we first started really talking about this in the age of social media and digital, expressions, we were still looking at it as, oh, there's a team over there that's focused in on building a blog or building a social media strategy or building some kind of owned media platform that was going to create engagement or education. And it was a team and a separate process, et cetera. But increasingly, as all of those things have begun to blur so much, social media, where our owned media, podcasting, websites, e-commerce channels, everything are all just becoming various surfaces where we're trying to create customer engagement. Increasingly, creation of that valuable content on all of those platforms is really the heart and soul of what marketing is today. And really, the only difference is the distribution method, whether it's paid, whether it's earned, or whether it's, some sort of shared organic idea. That's really the only difference. So marketing in so many ways has become a content creation organization that really just differentiates its marketing mix, as, going back to our classic marketing 101, by the distribution of that content. And so it is really the heart and soul that we see today.
So many questions. I'm going to have a tough time figuring out which one do I ask next here. So when I walk into a marketing, it's not what is your marketing strategy, it's what is your content marketing strategy.
In many ways, but there's the sort of reality of that, right? Where in many ways, as you well know, the perception in many cases sort of outweighs the reality of the situation. And so,
Mhm.
when we say content strategy, you get so many people, as I've
Yeah.
often said, you get four marketers in a room and you get five opinions about something, right? So what we think of, what many organizations think of as a content marketing strategy, doesn't really exist. In other words, this is what I call the conscious content marketers versus the unconscious content marketers. And I often use the example of Amazon for this, right? So Amazon at the tectonic scale, Amazon Prime Video is a perfect example of content marketing. It's a horrible business. They run an entirely horrible business, $20 billion that they spend on content, but it makes somewhere between $6 and $7 billion every year. But they don't look at it as a profitable business unit. That for them is a marketing effort to get more people to sign up for Amazon Prime. But they wouldn't say that, right? What they would say is, no, it's just smart business sense to create a platform for customers that value, that make them want to become. It's just a smart marketing strategy for them. So they're unconscious content marketers. And then you've got all the people who, of course, read the books and read the pamphlets and, sort of come to classes and do all the things with content marketing. And they would say content marketing strategy. I kind of don't care, right? As long as you do the thing, then it's great however you do the thing.
Which is providing valuable insights, education. I think back to the day when we were all trying to hack Google. How do we get on the first page? How do we get
Right.
to the top?
Right.
And we're trying to figure out the algorithm. And someone said the algorithm is based on the logic of relevant, frequent, valuable content.
Yep.
So
100%.
forget trying to hack the algorithm, hack the intent, and you're there. So what they've programmed us all to do is now just become the norm for kind of meeting consumers where they're at. Which has consumer or buying behavior changed over the last 5 to 10 years as we've evolved our marketing? Is it being driven by behavioral changes or by something else?
Oh, I think it's being completely reshaped by technology, right? I mean, you just think about, you mentioned Google and search as a great example of that, right? Pre 2000, the way that consumers would search for a product, and this is especially true if we look at B2B, right?
Mhm.
So B2B, the way that most buyers would select the long considered purchase of a B2B product was they would call the salesperson of whoever their current provider was, and they would ask, right? They would ask for recommendations. And that was B2B marketing in 1995 and 1993 and 1991,
Mhm.
right? But search changed all of that. It empowered so many people to make what we would now call sort of researched or better or more considered decisions about the buying process because they could now go find all of the different providers for things that they didn't do. They could get consumer reviews. They could see all of the various aspects. They could get educated on what how this thing was going to solve their need or want. And search really changed everything in terms of the ways that buyers behave and
Mm.
purchase products, whether it's a piece of chewing gum or whether it's a new generator for the business. And then what we've seen over the last 20 years is the slow evolution, maybe not so slow, but at least 20 years of evolution of training people where young people don't know any different now, right? For young people, they don't know a time where social media wasn't their direction of how they were actually going to buy something or learn something. That was really their key. And so we're now even in a different stage than we were in 2004 and 2005. So it's changing very quickly, and we are being changed with it as marketers.
And with that evolution and those changes, how is the marketing inside of a business changing? Whether it's marketing department, the chief marketing officer role? Because for years it was, what's marketing doing? How am I getting my ROI?
Yeah.
Marketing was the most esoteric part of a company. And speaking with any CEO, business owner, it was it's just an evil expense that I had to have. I
Yeah.
don't understand it, to where now it's quite a bit more tangible. It's seen.
Yeah.
What are we
Yeah.
seeing
It's
as to the
it's it's
makeup of that?
it's a double-sided coin, I find, right? So the interesting thing is what technology has brought, the sort of democratization, if you will, that technology has brought to all businesses, is flattened the landscape. It's made things infinitely more noisy. So it
Hmm.
is really hard to differentiate these days and create the kinds of experiences that were, you know, maybe more walled off to bigger organizations that had more money, that could spend more on TV, that could spend more on radio, that could spend more on print, and made it harder for startups. Well, now it's very easy, and I use easy in rock and roll quotes there, of course, because it's still difficult, but it's easier, let's say, for smaller companies to compete with bigger companies because the internet democratizes things quite a bit. However, what it's also done is create a siloification, if you will, in marketing, right? Where now many marketing teams, as they get bigger and bigger, start to specialize in various technologies and approaches, right? Whether it's now we have an email team, now we have a content team, now we have a SEO team, now we have, that's highly specialized, which has gotten us to a place in 2024 where we're so specialized and so focused on keeping this machine of marketing running that in many ways we're not doing the creative swing for the fences kinds of projects anymore, right? So, in other words, what I've been talking about of late is we have made marketing infinitely more predictable and less risky, but we've also taken out much of the art and the creativity and the collaboration from it as we've done so. And I think now where AI is starting to really put pressure on that, I think we're going to see a return to human collaboration, creativity, and human driven sort of differentiation because it's all we have left.
Used to be that if you created content, you were original. Well, no, everyone is
Exactly.
now creating content out of nowhere. I sat down, my husband used ChatGPT for the first time the other night.
Yeah.
And he's like, how do you know all of this? I'm like, hey, do you know how much content I produce? I
Yeah.
tell it what to say, but
Yeah.
it really makes me look good. And
Yeah.
so now that it's doing that, and that's how do we differentiate ourselves? How do we differentiate our brand? What's our USP? We're going to have to get creative again.
Absolutely, 100%,
Okay.
because like you say, ChatGPT is, a lot of people, the sort of critique of AI generated content these days is, of course, oh, well, it's just average. And it's actually not, right? It's actually not average. It's the most probable. So in other words, AI generated content is when you put in a prompt or you put in, whatever, independent of how sophisticated your prompt is, what you're getting is the most probable answer. The most probable answer sometimes will be really good.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's commonly said that, oh, this is the dumbest version of AI that you'll ever use. It'll only get smarter and smarter and smarter. And the key is that's probably true, but that only exacerbates the problem, which is we could come to depend on AI so much for the most probable answer, for the fastest answer, for the most agile answer, that we actually lose our ability to create new and innovative ideas, that we lose that muscle as a person. I was fascinated. I was watching 60 Minutes, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, where somebody who was making luxury handbags, and basically it takes 5 months for them to make a handbag for this luxury. And the interviewer said to the handbag maker, how do you stay in business? Like, how do you scale that? How do you get these out faster? And he said, we've operated for the last 20 years on speed being the most optimal part of business. And that's how we relate to the world is speed and agility. And he said, what if we didn't? Like, what if we started to look at quality and creativity as a lens that we can start to look through, where it's okay that we have to wait 5 months for a handbag because the
Mm-hmm.
quality will be worth the wait.
We've seen that evolution in HR with that specialization where it used to be you have an HR person and then you had talent acquisition, you had learning and development, you had comp and benefits. And what we saw in that is we're segmenting that. There just became this really big disconnect between what they were doing and what they needed to accomplish and the business and the
100%. Yes.
business goals and the business alignment. Where do you see that going with marketing where it's been segmented and not only align with the business, align with the customers? Because there's
Yeah.
a three prong, you've got to align all three of those. Business doesn't always align with the customers, but in reality, marketing's number one customer is the end customer, not necessarily the business.
That's right. That's right. And in so many ways, I think it's the biggest problem in marketing, of
Hmm.
modern marketing. The biggest problem is that what we're doing is that we're building teams of, train conductors, right? Is basically what we're doing is we're creating more and more people who come in and push buttons, configure things, incrementally move the needle on one part of the buyer's journey or not. They incrementally change landing pages and they incrementally work on the content management system and they incrementally work on the CRM system and they incrementally work on in these very specialized and technical
Yeah.
roles. And what we lose is sort of the strategic storytelling, the strategic creation, the strategic advertising, the strategic differentiation that is rampant. And what we do is we tend to bring that to agencies, we tend to bring that to freelancers and creative, chief creative officers and chief creative, CMOs and all those sorts of things. But increasingly, because we haven't evolved the matriculation from how we hire people to what we do, is that we're bringing in all these young people who know absolutely how to work the machines, but don't know how to think creatively and start to really think strategically about what they should be doing. So we're slowly dissolving the strategy out of marketing. We're slowly dissolving the sort of differentiating capabilities out of the marketing team and relying on technology to tell us what's going to work. And at some point, that mountain just it gets so fragile that it just breaks
Mhm.
apart. So you're so right, is that it's an HR problem, it's a CEO problem, it's a team problem, and it's a technology problem.
I'm curious, how do we blend in? Marketing used to be relied on for research and consumer behavior. To me,
Right?
that was the first
Right?
place I went to
Yeah.
say, is I've seen it in my business, the buying behaviors have changed over time. And if we're not continually evolving our marketing, I used to be every 18 months and it was every year. Now I feel like it's every 3 months as quickly as our industry is changing. Marketing's kind of gone to that transactional and click the button. And as part of bringing that creativity back, most don't think of research
Yeah. Yeah,
as creativity and innovation. But I'm starting to hear more and more CEOs say, I need someone out there telling me what does the market want to buy? How are they going to buy it? How are we going to go to market with it? And then come back and we make it. Are we
that's
seeing
right.
that come full circle?
Well, I don't think we're seeing it yet. I think that's the
Okay.
opportunity that businesses have. And I don't think I'm hopeful. I'm so hopeful that 2025 starts to bring some of that back. I mean, I was just writing recently about this idea that for the last 10 years, we have just been wrapped around the axle of Zuckerberg's move fast and break things, right? We have just been moving fast and breaking things. And now we're at a point where we're wondering why our entire day is spent fixing broken things. And so we need to slow down and get into things like the hard, difficult work, the creative iteration of customer research, of what they care about, what do our customers, how do they make decisions, and really understanding that at a deep level so that we can enable creativity and differentiation in what it is we're doing. And finding CEOs who have the patience for that is
Mhm.
difficult these days. Finding boards that have the patience for that is difficult these days. In a world of technology, it's like just throw AI at it and make it work. And so I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it's making a shift. But yeah, I think it's likely to get a little worse before it gets a little better.
Well, I think through how do you differentiate yourself from competitors? As I've listened to any number of economists and just about anyone out there, I don't know if there's anyone who disagrees that how to win over the next 5 to 10 years is through differentiation.
Sure.
And you mentioned at the beginning, it's all democratization, right? It is all commoditization right now. How are you going to differentiate yourself from how you are as an organization, your culture,
Yeah,
to how you communicate
exactly.
that differentiation from that marketing? So where do you see, I don't know what that going, but how is that going to evolve into the new way of doing things or the way of doing things versus the new way of doing things?
What I hope that it evolves into, what I believe earnestly that it evolves into, is that the who becomes incredibly important, right? So, that idea of, they can duplicate and copy everything you do except how you communicate, right? That's classic Don Schultz from integrated marketing and such,
Love it.
Don Schultz, one of my heroes of marketing. And the idea of how we communicate these days becomes a who's saying it, right? Who is actually, that trust, that differentiation comes at the level of who is actually saying it, whether it's our CEO, our CMO, voices in the organization, influencers, creators, people, right? People become the only element of something that our competitors really can't communicate or, excuse me, duplicate. And so when we
Mhm.
think about that, it's how we communicate, but it's also the storyteller themselves, right? So it's both of those things. We need great storytellers and great stories to tell. That's the only differentiation we really have left. Great ideas told by really engaging people.
You just hit on another trend that we've been seeing out there, which is putting individuals in the organizations out there as part of the brand and helping them build their own
Absolutely.
brand as thought leaders.
Yeah. It's absolutely into the thought leader perspective as well, but it's even into the distribution, right? So just here's at the very, very tactical level,
Yeah.
what we find so often is that it is better, more successful these days on your LinkedIn profile is a great example. This thing to stop doing is having your brand page post all the content. What now the brand page is for is to amplify the individual's voices. So you have your content in varying degree being amplified or being spoken by individual salespeople, the executives, the marketing people, the who in the people in the business. And what the brand page's role is then to then amplify those humans' voices. And that's just a simple tactical thing that represents what you're talking about, which is getting the voices of our brands into the people that we bring in, the teams that we have,
Because people tend to trust it.
other
I heard the
people.
exact same thing recently as to post it yourself and then have the company kind of spread it out, add some additional thoughts. Our head of sales and marketing said this. Here's why this is so great, and then
Absolutely,
distribute it
yes.
out. from the perspective people trust people,
Yep.
not companies, which then leads to
That's right.
that E word of engagement we've heard for a lot more the last couple of years of people engage with people, they don't engage with companies. And there was this
Right.
really strong push on LinkedIn's entire algorithm is based on engagement
Yeah,
and
that's right.
creating two-way conversations. Is that a thing of the past or something that is the what's to come?
I think it's what's to come, right? Is the idea of, you know, if you look at the trends in social medias, for example, as a sort of indicator, and you can see LinkedIn is a great example with people engaging with people, and that becoming much more important than the brand building a big following on their page, for example. The same is true, for example, though, on Facebook or on TikTok or on Instagram, where the algorithm has fundamentally shifted, where audience size doesn't matter anymore. The For You tab has replaced everything. And so every
Mm.
post has to earn its keep. The good news is that if you're a person, an individual, you don't have a big following, and you make a great post, it might go viral. It might actually reach more people than if you had a big audience. The bad news is if you've spent a long time sort of building that audience, it doesn't matter nearly as much. So surfacing new voices is really the function of a For You tab. Why? To keep you engaged and scrolling and flipping and swiping and doing all the things that social media is designed to do. So it becomes much more incumbent upon everybody to amplify their own voices and become a trusted source of interesting things rather than to focus in on, the old school model of saying, okay, we're going to create a Twitter or now an X account and we're going to try and get 1 million followers to our brand. That's an old school strategy that just isn't worth it anymore.
In one of those old school thought processes is talent has shifted quite a bit over the last 5+ years,
Yeah.
and that concern, that thought process, that old school of why am I promoting people who may not be here a year or two from now?
That's true. Yeah. That's the balance, right? And that comes back to our discussion of the investment in marketing teams, right? The investment in our people and in the focus of our marketing teams is such an important piece of that because if we don't, yes, you're right, they'll matriculate right out and find another job or we'll lose them. It's that classic what's that classic cartoon, where the manager walks into the CEO's office and says, we need to invest in training our people. And the CEO says, well, what if we invest in training and they leave? And the manager says, well, what if we don't invest in people and they stay, right? And so investing in teams is a smart thing to do.
From a strategic perspective, I can see as you're walking into, small to mid-sized organizations and working with them, that logic of yes, and imagine that really great talent who has a voice that people are following. If our platform continues to give them that voice, we can attract them. It's that one to
Exactly.
many
Yeah.
model. How do we become that employer of choice, whether it is great marketing people or great salespeople or great engineers? Some of the best thought leadership I've seen out there on LinkedIn are from engineers.
Yeah, right. Engineers or managers in marketing or interns, right? Or
Mhm.
freelancers or, all of that, where you're seeing really thoughtful content from various people. And the key is that as we start thinking about that as marketing leadership, we have to, or even business leadership, we have to think to ourselves, how are we investing in that and balancing that? The age old sayings, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? So it's not about finding that one person in your organization who can do everything because yes, you may lose that one person. So the idea is how do we start to basically pull all of these voices together in a way that helps us balance it, much like we would a portfolio, right? A portfolio of our team who can be at, some people are not camera ready, some people are not content ready, some people aren't interested in doing that, some people are very interested in doing that. And so finding those things within our organization, no matter how big or how small, is really thinking through how we can use it's really the distribution side of content because the brand will always centralize the idea of what we're going to say, right?
Hmm.
And it's up to the people then to tell that story in their own way.
You've got my wheels turning right now, Robert. Absolutely love this because I more and more I'm seeing true marketing organizations. They're the platform. They're not owning the talent. They're not owning the content. They're owning the distribution channel. And for
That's right.
them, that's where the magic is. And I can see inside of a company where we used to say we want everyone in the company to be in sales. That's expense. Sales is so much more expensive than marketing. In looking at any number of companies' P&Ls, look at the sales versus marketing. So how about we build a platform and a strategy around how do we make everyone into the marketing team? And
That's right.
how do you then pull that from your perspective? Where's the genius of then? How are you pulling that all together into a strategy that's aligning with the business goals? Because that could
And
get
that's
ugly real quick.
it brings us all the way back around, right? It brings us all the way back around to where we started this wonderful conversation, which is that's the content marketing strategy, right? That is at its heart, the content. How do you pull all of those activities and people together in so that it's a coordinated effort? That's the heart of a great content strategy, is that it is a coordinated effort among people who are telling a common story in unique ways to to many, many
Mhm.
distribution channels.
And yours and your platform might be one of them. And there's so many out there that
Absolutely.
are just
Yeah.
incredible. And we don't need to be the expert on that. When you look at strategies for, I love it, you said it really democratized it. You don't need to be a large company anymore. You could be a solopreneur, you could be a
Sure.
small to mid-size market company. I know you step in as a fractional CMO and help them take what they have and leverage it. Because most
That's right.
people, they've got the story there. They've got the makings, they've got the bones. They're just been doing tactics before strategy.
Yes, indeed.
What's one of the first things that you're stepping in and reviewing, looking at, or working with them on, where you would give a piece of advice, say, start here?
The biggest piece of advice that I can offer is it's it's a little esoteric, but I think it'll come through. What happens in most organizations when I walk in, big or small these days,
Hmm.
is the feeling, whether it's true or not, the feeling is we already create too much content. We already create too much content out there, and it's just overwhelming. It's swamping our boat, right? And we don't know how we can create more. And when you peel back the covers, what you understand very quickly is that they don't actually create too much content. What they're doing is creating too many digital assets. In other words, they're creating too much reinventing the wheel every day. What I mean by that is that we are trained, classically trained as marketers, coming back to our HR and marketing education, we are classically trained to think container first, story second. In other words, if you think about what we've classically been taught, it's always, I need an ad campaign. I need an email. I need a white paper. I need a blog post. I need an ad. I need whatever the container is. And then we go, great, let's fill it full of words and pictures and pretty things, right? That's classic marketing process. Instead, we need to flip that and
Hmm.
coordinate around what is the story, the one, two, five stories, core stories that we want to tell and we want to be known for and we want to use to differentiate our marketplace brand and to say, these are the five that we want to anchor on. And then a coordinated effort to start with that content and then tell that story in as many containers as needs to be created. Because it's not that we're creating too many ideas. It's that we're creating way
Hmm.
too many ideas in too many digital assets. So I see really small, tiny ideas get conflated into a white paper because that's what's due on Friday. I see big ideas get trapped in the idea of a blog post. Why? Because it was due on Friday. And so if we can just switch that and start to figure out how are we coordinating our teams together in a process that helps us identify the core stories first, then figure out the right distribution channels and containers that we have, and which is basically how a media company operates, then we will actually be much better off and then figure out, yes, we may have the right story, we may have the right creative, we may have the right brand. We're just not telling it in a very cohesive or coordinated way.
And it's amazing how it almost starts to write itself. You could lay out a
Yeah,
content calendar. And once you have that, here are the five stories, here's the characters in it, here's where it almost writes itself. And in my head, I had all these questions I wanted to ask you. You just reminded me of one of them, which is
sure.
the difference, the stories. We want to tell the story about the company, its origin. We want to tell the story of our product. We want to build
Right?
trust there. Then the other side of it is, and correct me if I'm wrong, or is Donald Miller brand story?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And no. The story is about the customer. They're the hero,
That's
not
right.
your product, not you. Is that a better way of building that trust with the company, with the individuals? Is those can easily be seen as, right, it's one or the other. How do you
Yeah.
bring that together to really have a compelling storylines
Yeah.
for
So
next year?
what we have to understand is that brand inherently is not a story. Our brand is not a story, right? Our brand, in varying degree, that we love it or hate it, our brand is the North Star. It's what we want to be. It's the end of the story, right? It's the destruction of the Death Star. It's the climbing of the mountain. It's the killing of the shark. It's that's what we want to get to. So inherently, it's not a good story because it's not a journey. It's actually the destination. And so what we have to understand is if that's the destination, our brand's stories, in other words, the apostrophe matters there, the brand's stories, that's what introduces why I should take this journey toward that destination. So if you think about it in the most practical sense, I always use Nike because Nike, of course, has thrown up everything and Nike's great marketing and blah blah blah. Just do it or celebrating the athlete, which is basically their little asterisk
That's
on their about us page. We celebrate the athlete, and if you have a body, you're an athlete. That's the brand. That's not a story. Their story is told in all of the amazing content that they create that introduces tension and the journey and the why you want to struggle and why you want to go through the journey to get to just do it, right? Getting to just do it is the journey. That's the story we want to tell. And so they are very different. And so separating out those concepts instead of saying, hey, one of the things I'll ask a CMO all the time is I'll say, tell me about your story. And they'll say, we need customers to understand how innovative we are. And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, they don't need to know that. They'll get about their day very well, not waking up and going, I wonder why brand X hasn't told me how innovative they are today, right? That's nobody cares about that. What we want to care about is why they're demonstrably show their innovation through the struggle to get to that innovation, the hero's journey, right? Why we want to take that journey to that destination. If we start anchoring our stories there, we'll be in a great spot.
Why does that innovation impact me? How is it going to
Exactly.
make my life better? How's it going to solve
Exactly.
my problem? We were pretty what's in it for me with society to begin with. The last 5 years, I think, have amplified that
Yeah,
in so
that's right.
many ways. And we don't have to solve problems that people don't know they have yet. There's so many we all know we have. As you said, we've been living our lives creating problems just to solve problems at this
Yeah,
point
exactly.
in our journey. So you made it so crisp and clear right there is the role of the company is to create the destination and then the storyline for the customer's journey there.
That's the behavior we want to change, right? We want to
Okay.
make them take that journey. We want to convince them that taking that journey is worth that destination.
Then the content is how are we going to convey it? And then that last step is now which channel is going to
Exactly.
be the best
Where do I tell it?
versus we're on LinkedIn. We got to do 20,000 posts this year. Just start throwing them at me. Um,
That's right.
what's the destination we want? What journey do we want to take our customer on? And I love it. We did full circle, Robert. You can see, no, we went through my list. I'm going to need to start jotting them down and have you back on the show
100%.
here to go through the next ones. And this will be fun over time to looking back and say, wow, did we nail it? Or
Yeah,
were we
Yeah.
out there. It did not go the way we thought it was going to
We
go.
might be wrong. We might be wrong.
But I think at the core, you hit it as long as we're keeping the customer in mind.
That's it.
And
We can't go wrong if you keep the customer in mind,
yeah,
right? It's to speaking to the brand idea. It's like, we got so wrapped around the axle of Simon Sinek's start with why, right? And so we said, oh, no, no, do we start with why or do we start with what? It's like none of that matters. Starting with your why or starting with your what doesn't matter if you don't start with the customer's why. You start with the customer's why, you will be in good shape no matter what happens.
and here to serve them. Robert, thank
Yeah,
you so much for your time, your genius, your eloquent way of stating it out in a way that marketing is just not fun. It's logical. It makes
it's
sense, and there are patterns to it. And I feel like we should have our own little logo that says, let's bring back the innovation and creativity in marketing.
absolutely creativity, collaboration, and curiosity. Must repeat.
Oh, you've been reading all of my content. They've got to start with a C. All right. Thank you so much, Robert. And until next time.